Marketer of the Day, episode 520. Groundhog Day is an event, not a business strategy. Embrace minimalism. Become goal-obsessed. Understand your customers. And stand out from the crowd. With Adam Hommey.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. I think you're going to have a lot of fun listening to today's episode because we're here with Adam Hommey. And Adam is the founder and the creator of the Business Creators Institute. He created the Creators Institute, right? He helps you emancipate the power of information and win at the game of business and marketing, so you spend less time editing and maintaining and more time educating your audience and monetizing your business. And he has a new book out we'll talk about, and we'll talk about all kinds of off-the-wall things, I'm sure. So, Adam, glad to be talking to you.
Robert, thanks for having me aboard. I got to tell you that you're right. The weather's fine. I'm glad I jumped in.
Cool. So I mean, with all the craziness of the world and all the things happening on internet marketing and business and just everything that's happening, what is the latest and greatest in your world these days?
Well, as you mentioned in my introduction, we recently released our book, Groundhog Day is an Event, Not a Business Strategy. Hit the shelves on Groundhog Day, which was Friday, February 2nd, 2018. Within 24 hours, we will achieve bestseller status in the United States, Canada, and Germany for Kindle in the category of semantics, which is a pretty interesting topic because a lot of what we speak about inside the book is about how language, by making subtle adjustments, can make you so much more powerful as a business creator and as a human being. Other things we have going on, it's a little chilly here in Las Vegas, unseasonably so, but looking forward to those days where it'll be 118 degrees in the shade. I'm hanging out here right now this morning on Skype. I have my cat, Alessandra, next to me. Hopefully not going to knock the headset right off my head, and we're going to have a great conversation.
Super cool. Well, a lot of stuff to unpack in there already. And so I read your book this morning a little bit. And yeah, I think this is a great concept. Just the whole idea that the Groundhog's Day it's like the movie Groundhog's Day, where a lot of business owners are on autopilot, asleep at the wheel, reliving the same problems, struggles, frustrations over and over again, and how you look at the literal groundhog itself, where you might look at a groundhog as this creature that's burrowing and you're like, oh, it's such a nuisance. But then you look at, well, they burrow down and they have all these different rooms, like there's the mating room and there's the living room and all these, and like the hibernation room and all these things. And the whole concept that, well, there's this groundhog there, it's digging around, but they displace all this dirt, and agriculturally it even helps things. And so, and then also you mentioned there that we all have problems with our language, right? If kept unchecked, and things like saying, you won't regret this, or don't mess up. So that's really important. And you mentioned the weather there, and it's pretty cold here over in Turlock, California. My car is currently in the shop. There's a loaner car, and it's this Mercedes convertible. And I drove it this morning to the store and back. It was 30 degrees, and I forgot to put on a jacket. And as I was driving, I saw the vapor come out of my breath. It was super cold, but it was a lot of fun because I was driving a Mercedes convertible around. So just like how you said that there's the cold now, but the cold allows you to enjoy the warmth later, and vice versa. I can definitely relate to all those different things.
Right, that's very true. And you're right. We discovered that so many entrepreneurs find themselves in what we call the Groundhog Day loop, where it feels like, despite every best year ever declaration, if you really go back and look at all those best year declarations, it seems like they're saying the same thing over and over again. In many cases, they're even stating the same revenue goals, maybe adjusted for inflation, maybe not. But it's the same thing. It's like that movie, Groundhog Day. And what we want people to recognize is that many times what is holding you back from achieving that next level or that different level or that new plateau and getting out of the loop you're in right now is being sabotaged by some little thing burrowed beneath the surface. We all talk about these grand strategies and massive transformations. In many cases, people are just fine. There's just something inside that needs to be unearthed. And once we do that, then we can move forward.
Super cool. I agree with you there. And it seems like a lot of this best year ever stuff, it's just New Year's resolutions by a different name. It almost feels like once everyone caught on that New Year's resolutions are a way that people fool themselves into thinking that things will be better, kind of have those deferred dreams there. But then a couple weeks later into the new year, they're back on the same old stuff. And what was helpful for me with that kind of stuff is instead of creating like the huge master plan, the huge goals, to be more practical and to realize that we're on the right track, but we just might need a little bit of thinking, and that, in hindsight, that the details and the mistakes don't matter that much. And what really hit home a lot for me in your book, and once again, to let everyone know, the book is Groundhog Day is an Event, Not a Business Strategy. You can find it on Amazon by Adam Hommey. So what really struck me a lot in your book about this whole idea of embracing imperfectionism was that a lot of people get hung up about things like typos, right? They'll say, I can't put up my webpage because it might have all these typos, or I'm not going to buy this thing because I saw a typo on the sales letter. And so you mentioned that, and how like many times there's the dark cloud and there's the silver lining. And a lot of these things that we think are bad actually have positive outcomes. So little imperfections like typos actually might break people out of their trance and get them to sit up and pay attention. So there's all these things that maybe we think we're doing wrong that actually have a plus side to them.
It's a funny story. We have a client who for many, many years has sent his weekly e-zine or e-newsletter every Monday. And for years, that e-zine had the same subject line every single week. He never changed the subject line. The subject line always started with the letter D. Now, Robert, you know that when you haven't cleared your cookies or cache on your browser, in many cases, when you go to that same field you filled out before, all you have to do is type the first letter and it'll pop up what was there before, and you can just click on it and there you go. He was used to doing that with his subject line. And so he'd type the letter D, the rest of the subject line would pop up, and he'd click on it and there'd be a subject line. Well, one week he was just kind of moving fast. He typed the letter D, but he forgot to click on what popped up. And when his e-zine went out without him noticing beforehand, the subject line was the letter D. Now, there are folks out there who would absolutely freak out over that. They'd be looking to send correction emails, apologies. They would be having frenetic meetings with their team. How did we let this happen? Do you realize how this makes us look? Now, this gentleman has been working with the media for 30 years, and working with reporters and doing public relations is something that does require typically a high level of grammatical accuracy. So you would think that he would be especially mortified that he allowed that to happen, but no. He said, okay, send it out with a D. Let's see what happens. His open rates went up by 3%, and he got 2 new coaching clients and 1 new member for his recurring monthly program as a direct result traced back to that email. The lesson here is that the pattern interrupt got people's attention. Oh, this guy sent out this email and it just has the letter D as a subject line. Well, I'm going to open that one just to see what's inside. So that's a case where by focusing on the silver lining, which were the 2 new clients and a new member of his program, rather than the cloud, oh my goodness, we sent this e-zine out with the wrong subject line, he got out of his groundhog loop and was able to serve from the intersection of his brilliance and passion.
Super awesome. One of the most profitable mistakes he ever made, I'm sure. So that's really cool. Like how that pattern interrupt and the way that we go about doing things. We don't have to be so rigid and uptight. And what you're making me think of is, well, you're making me think of 2 things. One, an easy thing is, I'm sure you've heard of Rick Raditz from like way back, and. Of course. And he had one of the most famous opt-in pages, at least in our little niche, where he had an opt-in page, and this was right when video was becoming a thing, where you went to a web page, fill out your name and email address, and he was on video, and he's just sitting there, and the video's playing, and he goes and he's like eating some potato chips, and then you're like, is he going to say something? And he goes and he takes a drink of his soda, and you're like, okay, now he's going to start talking on the video, and it was just... It might have even been in a loop. He was just like kind of sitting on the webpage and nothing was happening. And I thought it was one of the silliest, most genius things I've ever seen, because it really made me sit up and pay attention that this guy was on video on an opt-in page, and you're expecting him to have a flashy headline and have all this slick sales message, but he was just sitting there, and it was a total pattern interrupt. And then example number 2 that makes me think of, and I haven't thought of this in years, was years and years ago, I launched one of the first landing page plugins for WordPress, and we sold it as part of a class, and it didn't really sell that well. And then I was awake at maybe midnight, and I recorded a 12-minute demo video to my business partner at the time, and I was just like showing him some stuff, and I marketed it or I sent it out to the list as a leaked video. So I did kind of what your friend there did, where he had a different subject line, but in this case, I wrote a message to my business partner saying, "Hey, don't share this with anyone. Check out this video, check out this new thing that's in our plugin." I sent it, woke up the next morning to $16,000 in the PayPal account, because that was the thing where we kept on hitting the brick wall, trying to do things the way that we were always doing, being caught in that groundhog loop there that you mentioned, not having results, and then mixed things up, did something wacky and crazy, and then had a lot of success. So, I mean, you and I both kind of shared some interesting stories here about how to break the pattern. So, I mean, how does this apply to practical terms for people listening? Like, should they be examining their business and looking at the actions they're taking? Like, if someone's saying, well, some of these examples are inspiring me, but how do I myself break that pattern of my customers and people watching me?
All right, there's a tactic that we share inside the book, and the title of it is, Do You Have To? So what I encourage people to do is look at all these policies and procedures and ways of doing things you have going on in your business right now, and look at them through the lens of knowing that in many cases, policies, procedures, and rules are permanent solutions to temporary problems that people have already forgotten even happened. So you go through these things and you ask questions like, would it matter if we didn't do this at all? Would it matter if we did this differently? Would it matter if we skipped this step? Would anybody notice? Would the team notice? Would the clients notice? Would I notice? And you go through this whole list of questions that are located inside the Groundhog book, and you may discover that a whole segment of what you're doing every day in your business you can just simply not do. I discovered this kind of by accident a few years ago when I was in a state of huge overwhelm with a lot of projects and a lot of clients, and it seemed like I just could not by any means get myself out of the burrow, for lack of a better phrase, and I was perpetually buried in all this work. So I just started, and I'll say it, I just started randomly skipping steps just to see what would happen. And it turned out that all that really happened is we got the results faster. So that caused me to next time go back and look at things critically, asking a series of questions. Would anybody notice if we didn't do this? Would the client notice? Would I notice? Another example of this is back when we used to have a web development firm about 8 years ago. This was back during the days before WordPress, when we were still doing HTML, CSS, server-side includes, all this other stuff. And we saw a lot more things in the way of customization in terms of little bells and whistles. You had the videos hopping around the page, and then you had to deal with things. I mean, today it's mobile compatibility. Back then it was accommodating Internet Explorer 6, which 20% of the population used, even though it was rated one of the 20 worst softwares of all time by a couple outlets that rate these sort of things. And what we discovered through all of this is that these little things that were so important to the clients often went completely unnoticed by their audience. We had projects that got hamstrung because in one version of Internet Explorer, there was this corner of an image that was 1 millimeter closer to the text than it was in all the other versions. And this would literally hold up launches of websites. So I would say to clients when they got in this loop and I needed to get them out of the burrow, I would say, can you please give me a list of everybody who has already notified you that there is no way that they would ever buy anything from you or even listen to you if your image was 1 millimeter closer to the text in Internet Explorer than it was in Firefox. And 99% of the time, this broke them out of the loop. So we had another case where the websites were frequently getting hacked, and this was actually in the era of WordPress because we got out of the game just as WordPress was coming in, and we went to the client. We said, look, you've already invested a couple $1,000s in fighting this virus that keeps coming back. All the security protocols are there. We have no stupid plugins. We have the inscrutable passwords, everything under the sun, but this just keeps happening. We can't have this happening to your clients. So we want to fix this, and we just need carte blanche to do it. And we were looking to get out of that game altogether. So we wanted to solve this once and for all and then work with that client in other areas. And the client was tired of hearing from his prospects and his audience that they were seeing porn images when they visited his website. So what we did is we just simply rebuilt everything using default templates. And I even challenged the client. I said, look, we undid a lot of your bells and whistles. If you notice any, let me know. He actually went and looked and he couldn't find any. So these things that you think may be so critical, not only are not being noticed or cared about by your audience, but in some cases, you'll forget about them the next day. Something to think about.
Yeah, that is pretty deep to think about, that it's not about you. I mean, it's one thing if you make a web page and you say, oh, I'm so proud of all the bells and whistles. I'm so proud of all the great things on there. But if no one buys from you, then who cares? And conversely, if you make a web page and it's ugly and you hate how it looks, but it makes you tons and tons of money, then again, like, who cares? It's serving its job. And you're making me think. You're making me think of so many different things, like, in, as you mentioned, especially with the technical stuff, this happens all the time, right? Like a software provider or someone will just give way too much credit to one little feature that maybe they spent all this time on, but if no one uses it, who cares? And there's also, like, one thing that was really inspiring for me early on was when I started getting into video and audio and, like, putting myself out there more, was there was some story where somebody bought a guitar DVD off of eBay. And he put it in the player and he started playing, and he heard, like, guitar playing. And then he's like, this is weird. The screen's completely black, but I hear this guitar playing. And then the guy takes the lens cap off of the camera. Like, he started filming this DVD and then took forgot to take the lens cap off, but then didn't edit it out. And then the buyer of that guitar DVD didn't give a crap because it still got the job done, right? And that's
right.
That's always my kind of thinking of, like, if the choice is between something that's pretty but useless versus ugly but useful, I'll take ugly and useful all day long. So it seems like a lot of what you're talking about here and what you put in your book is that a lot of those details don't really matter as much as we think that they do, and people aren't even going to freaking notice.
That's the best part. During those days when I had that company, it seemed like it all came down to this one tiny little thing that was so important to the client, but had never actually been market tested, and in the long range of things would really turn into nothing but a maintenance item. And the more we were able to get rid of those things, and usually what we had to do is just quietly remove them later when nobody was looking, the better things ran. So I would apply that to all areas of your business for those who are listening, whether you are in any sort of professional discipline, whether you're a professional service provider, whether you're an info product seller, a coach, a consultant, a mentor, a public speaker, a professional author. There's very likely things you just simply don't need to do at all, that not only are you the only one who cares, but a year from now, you won't even remember that you cared in the first place because it just doesn't really matter. And the sooner you can get out of that burrow and unearth the soil and nourish the greener grass on your side of the fence, the more you'll enjoy the proceeds.
That's simple but really powerful. So minimalism and asking, do you have to? And what you're making me think of is, as you said, sometimes people let the smallest, most insignificant, silliest things hold them up. And sometimes they just don't have a good way of thinking about it. Sometimes it's low confidence in disguise. Right. But this whole asking this question, like, do you have to blank? What you're making me think of is a lot of people stress out about their web pages, their sales letters, their products. And at one point I was really pressed for time and I was putting out a product and I was like making half the sales letter, half the product. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to write the sales letter first. I'm not even going to worry about the product yet. Let me get the sales letter in place and then I'll get the product done afterwards. And the same kind of thinking went when I began presenting and pitching things on webinars. Instead of having the product ready, I'd say, well, this is an upcoming 4-week, 8-week class. Let me just pitch this. And then we'll make the content live. And even now that podcasting is a thing, like you and I jumped into this without any kind of plan at all, not to like brag or say that we're like such great, I don't know, conversationalists or whatever. But what the heck is the point of meeting for an hour before a 30-minute interview to say, well, first I'll say this and then you'll say that. Like, how does that make anything better? Who's even going to notice? Is that going to make us any more money? Well, heck no. So just keep it simple and look at the pieces that we can remove. Super great, super awesome. And so,
right.
So what this leads me into wondering, especially about your thought process, is, as you know, there's a lot of negativity out there, right? There's negativity that comes from within, that comes from all these different people. And sometimes it's easy for other people's head trash to rub off on you without you even realizing it. So with all the, the minor failures and setbacks and challenges and struggles and all the things that us entrepreneurs have to deal with, do you have any, like, I don't know, techniques or things to keep in mind to stay positive, to stay motivated and not let all the bad stuff in?
Well, part of that is just simply a matter of being in alignment with your own truth. And I'm going to go on a little bit of a loop here, but it'll make sense in just a moment. Inside the book, I argue that you want the truth? There's no such thing as the truth. Here's what we're getting at. We are, each of us individually, me, you, each one of our listeners, is the sum product of their own education, background, experiences, and just overall what they've gone through in their life. Nobody has had the same combination of those things as they have. That is why two people can look at a set of facts that are not in dispute. They can agree that these facts are the facts, but they can assign different meanings to them. This is why three people can view an incident and then take lie detector tests, give different stories, and all pass with flying colors, because what they see and what they report is in alignment with their truth, which is why when I hear people talk about the truth or tell the truth or you're a liar or how could you possibly say something like that, we all are in alignment with our own truths. And the more you can understand another person's truth, the more you can appreciate where they're coming from. And in many cases, you can gain something that makes your own situation even more powerful. Let me give you an example. This is not in the book, but I'll share it with you guys. I'm not going to mention any names, but I think most of our listeners are going to know who I'm talking about. During the last presidential election, there was a candidate who was going around and he was doing a lot of rallies. So you already know who I'm talking about. I had already been to one of the rallies, so I'd already had the experience. But he was coming back to Las Vegas, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, are you going to go to his rally?" And I'm thinking, it's Saturday. It's going to be on Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning. And in order to get a good view, you got to get there by 5 in the morning and stand in line for 5 hours. I have literally everything else in my life is more important to me on a Saturday morning. But my friend was somebody who adhered to the other side. And he wanted to go to the rally with a friend, somebody who would help him feel comfortable there, because he just wanted to get the direct view. He wanted the unfiltered view. He didn't want to see it through the media. He didn't want to see it through other people's interpretations. He wanted to see it with his own eyes and hear it with his own ears. So we went, and he was treated with absolute respect by everybody there. And they asked him some questions about his point of view and things like that. And then when we were riding home after we finished attending the rally, he said, I really was not persuaded one bit by this candidate, but I'll tell you why I'm so glad I came to this thing is because a few people who were there challenged my assumptions about my point of view, and it's going to cause me to go back and research so that I can be even stronger when presenting my point of view. So by allowing himself to see the other side, viewing it through the lens of his truth and giving people the opportunity to share their truth, it actually made him a more effective advocate for the change he wanted to see in the world.
Super cool. And that relates to a bunch of other things in your book. Like what you're making me think of is you have this one section where you say, as far as there's multiple truths, don't just have this black and white thinking, but if there's a thing or a person that you don't agree with, start with the similarities. And I mean, it even applied to, you had a section about selling too, right? Like,
yes.
don't disagree with that prospect. Instead, find the common ground and then figure out a way to kind of edge in there. So can you unpack that a little bit as far as the way that this applies to like, business or like relationships, things like that, of like, don't just flat out get triggered and block it off, but find a way to kind of worm your way in there, so to speak.
Oh, I agree. This is a very important topic. And that's actually the principle right there. It's called the I agree principle. So when you find yourself in a situation where you are confronted with a point of view that perhaps goes up against your confirmation biases or disagrees with your point of view, then I encourage you to look at the situation, identify facts not in dispute, and say that I agree. Let's use politics as an example, because we frequently see people get all fired up on social media because somebody posted some meme that they disagree with, and obviously they're a horrible person. So I like to debate this stuff sometimes. I don't really do it online because I know it's counterproductive, but in private conversations and with people I know personally, I'll have these discussions all the time. So what happens is somebody comes to you, they'll present a string of facts not in dispute about some political figure, some policy, and then they'll bring it to the point and they'll say, with everything I've just told you, do you agree that he or she is a bad person and this is bad for our country? Well, when you hear that, that's actually not a request for agreement, that's a challenge. Because when you use that kind of language, like don't you agree or do you agree, it's a demand that you renounce your truth in order to convert to somebody else's truth. And it oftentimes is not taken into consideration your truth. So here's what I like to do. I like to flip it around. And I'll say, I agree that we have some big problems in our country that just aren't getting solved. So I'm going to add another concept to that, and this is actually a word-for-word thing that people can use. You can apply it to a business strategy. You can apply it to a political debate. You can apply it to whether you prefer Mexican or Italian food. You can apply it to whether it's Ford or Chevy or whatever, black or white cats or dogs, lizards or snakes, whatever. So you combine the I agree principle with a follow-up question, and this basically gives you what I like to call a 1-2 introduction for your own point of view. So I would say something like, Robert, I agree. These sorts of issues can be very problematic if they go unheeded and unaddressed. I can definitely see what you mean there. Just one question, if I may. And then what you do is you introduce your counterpoint as a question asked from a place of genuine curiosity. So, let's say we're talking about, let's see, what's a hot situation here? Pretty much anytime anybody listens to this, unfortunately, the debate over the Second Amendment will probably be a big one. So let's say that you're on one side and somebody else is on a different side. So you say, I agree. These sorts of issues can be very problematic if they go unheeded and unaddressed. And I think that that's a fact not in dispute that most people will agree with. I can definitely see what you mean there, which simply means that you acknowledge that they have a point of view and you understand their point of view. So just one question, if I may. So let's say that I was a pro Second Amendment person, and somebody was saying, well, we need to confiscate all the AR-15s, and if it wasn't for guns, we wouldn't have shootings. And I might say, I agree. These sorts of issues can be very problematic if they go unheeded and unaddressed. I can definitely see what you mean there. Just one question, if I may. Have you ever considered that there are many different ways that we can have these types of tragedies? In fact, just recently in China, we had a person who managed to stab 131 people or something like that in a mass killing. So what I'm doing is, rather than saying, no, you're wrong, I'm actually agreeing with them that there are problematic issues, which is a fact not in dispute. But then as a question from a point of genuine curiosity, I'm asking their feedback on my point of view. So it gives them the opportunity to look at my point of view as if they're being consulted on it, even though what I'm really doing is sharing my point of view. And hopefully I plant a seed and maybe we meet somewhere in the middle, because I have found that usually the best solution is somewhere between the extremes.
Yeah, and what you're making me think of here is that, there's that saying, like, would you rather be right or be happy, right?
Yes.
And what I'm hearing here is that asking questions and getting to understanding is the most important thing, and not just to listen with the intent to reply, but listen with the intent to understand. It doesn't always have to be a debate or a fight or any of that. And it seems like a lot of people who have like the adversarial sort of way of thinking. And again, like it can apply to a political debate. It can apply to, I'm trying to start a business. I bought all these courses. Why isn't it working? And it applies to most things, like this circular thinking where people fall into a lot of these traps, and they don't want to pick apart the layers. They don't want to unpack why they believe or why they think a certain thing. They don't want to look at whatever the other side is. Again, if it's politics or it's the other side is everyone else is making money but me, they don't even want to dissect what's going on there. They just fall into some of these traps, like the ad hominem bias, right? Which means that I don't believe anything this person says just because of their character. And it doesn't matter if they have all these facts, if it can be backed up, but I don't like the person. I'm just going to discard all their information. And it's like, but you're doing yourself a disservice because now you don't understand. Or things like the straw man fallacy, which means that here's what I believe, and I'm going to decide that the opposition, they do all this crazy stuff. And so the other side is bad, me good, and just basically reducing something into again, black and white terms. And I think that the end result, as I'm thinking about this here, it sounds like the end result is that people are end up getting trapped in the circular thinking. They don't even realize they're stuck in circular thinking. And as a result, they don't realize what's new information, right? They're getting this stuff that's reinforcing their confirmation bias, and they think they're learning new stuff, but it's like, no, you're relearning the same thing over and over again. How about break out of your shell?
Right. And I'm going to share something else. As I said, I get into these types of debates a lot with people who I'm capable of having these types of discussions with, because we're on the same wavelength of mutual respect for each other's point of view. And I have to tell you that somebody had thought that they had persuaded me to their point of view on something just because I hadn't argued with them. The fact was, I knew that there was absolutely no way I was going to convince them of my point of view. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to hear them talk. I wanted to find out about their truth, what led them to the point of view that they had, because I wanted to gain a greater understanding of that person and of the human condition. And for me to interject and say, but what about this? What about this? What about this? Would be getting in the way of my discovery process that helped me to appreciate them more as a human being. They took my silence and my nodding as agreement and conversion, which it just wasn't the case. I simply wanted to give them an unobstructed path to show me their own truth so that I could understand them more profoundly. And in the process, I did learn a few things, because instead of interjecting or looking for the points of disagreement, I just wanted to let them talk. And this is very important when it comes to marketing as well, because in many ways, we may find ourselves arguing with our audience about what they need or want. And when you consider that people oftentimes say what they want or say what they need because they have been programmed subconsciously to believe that's what society expects them to say, it can get very confusing. As marketers, as business people, as persuaders, as human beings dealing with other human beings, what's most important is not what people say they want. It's not what people say they need. It's what gets them to respond in the way that we want them to respond. So think about the person's real deep reason for wanting to invest in your products, your services, in your programs. Here's the analogy I love to use. People don't buy a drill because they want to drill a hole. They buy a drill because they want to build something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and so what I'm hearing from all this is that, if people get stuck in the old way of thinking, the interrupting, the interjecting, the fight or flight, and they end up completely missing the mark, right? They're trying to persuade someone when people can't really be persuaded that much, and the goal shouldn't be to be persuaded. And what I'm hearing a lot from you as well, as far as like the understanding side of things, is that the thought process and the behind the scenes might even be more important than the end result, right? It's like, if I see someone's really slick webinar presentation or their really slick product, I kind of want to know what led them to making that presentation, and the slick, polished end result isn't really that important. And as you're explaining some of these stories here, it's making me realize that something that really messed me up pretty recently, maybe a year or two ago, was this idea of the mirror, which is that if I criticize someone, even in my head, if I see someone doing something I don't like, chances are I'm noticing that because it's bringing to attention something I don't like about myself, right? Like bringing it back to maybe the typos on a web page. If someone goes out of their way to angrily email you and say, you have typos on your web page, how dare you? Well, then it's painful to think about, but that person who's reaching out and being angry, they're themselves insecure about the mistakes that maybe they make or are frustrated with maybe not launching that product because they think that they need to fix every single imperfection before things are out there. And so we need to just take action and not think about all these things too much that usually hang us up. And one thing that really struck me about your book was there were some sections that were talking about how people don't make sales because they're just afraid to even ask for it, right? They tell themselves these stories that, well, I can't make that phone call because if I do, they'll pick up and they'll say this and this and that, and they won't buy. And it's like, well, first of all, you just had this whole play happen in your head. It's not going to go that way. And how do you even know it's going to go that way unless you do it? So can you explore that for us a little bit, just as far as people are afraid to ask, they self-sabotage, they shoot themselves in the foot. Why does this happen, and how do we avoid that?
Okay, a lot of it comes from fear of rejection, fear of failure, what have you. I've seen cases where, let's say somebody was invited to present on a webinar or speak on a stage, and they would just decide that, oh no, they don't want me to make that offer. They don't want me to show this to the audience. Well, about 2 months ago, I was invited to speak on a stage. It was kind of a last-minute thing, and it was right here in Las Vegas. And it was for a pretty prominent organization that's known internationally and has hundreds of members. I was going to be on stage in front of almost 200 people. And I was told that it was a no-pitch type thing. But you know what? I said, I have this book coming out in 3 weeks. It's called Groundhog Day is an Event, Not a Business Strategy. And I was wondering if I could pre-sell the book, if I could make an offer where I'd sell to your audience for free, just pay shipping and handling. I'll get them a PDF as soon as the working proof is done, and then I'll mail them a paperback. Now, they came back to me and said, no, we'd rather you not sell anything, as we said, but you have a free offer, in which case I offered them the Business Creators Resource Kit. And even then, I said, is it okay if I do a pitch deck from the stage so that I can walk them through a pitch and then show them that the offer is actually free and then let them literally choose on the order form whether it's going to be zilch, zero, nada, what have you. Now, many people may have said, well, they said no pitching, so I better not even do anything. I said, the heck with it. I'm going to ask because I'm going to give them the opportunity to say no. What if I had the idea that I wanted to pre-sell my book and because I didn't ask the question, I never would have found out that their response would have been, well, normally we won't do this, but it is just a book, so sure. And because you were willing to step in at the last minute and change your plans to speak on our stage, we'll be flexible with you. By making that decision for the other person without giving them the chance to make the decision, that was actually kind of disrespecting them when you think about it, because they would have literally been colluding with me to deny their audience the opportunity to gain benefits without even realizing they were doing so. Unwitting colluder or something like that, if you want to use that type of phrase. So we don't have the right to assume the answers to questions that we need to ask others without asking them first. Here's a funny story I love to tell people. One of the things that my company does is we provide technical training for people who are looking to do a lot of their own marketing strategies and marketing management in-house. So we had this client a few years ago who decided that rather than hire external virtual assistants, she wanted to work with interns from a local college, groom those people to become employees after they graduated. But in the meantime, she needed them to function as interns and be able to manage all her Infusionsoft stuff. Now, I know some stuff about Infusionsoft, so I went through with the client. I said, okay, so they need to know web forms. They need to know tagging and categories and how to send a broadcast and things like that. So I said, sure, we'll do 2 sessions. Here's the rate, and I just need to get them live on with me so I can walk them through the demos, and we'll record it, and you have it for posterity. So one of the things I showed them was the proper way to set up a web form and direct it to the right thank you page and tag it the right way and what have you. And I had them build it while I watched them through Skype. And after they were done, I tested that web form with my cat's email address. My cat, Stella. Yes, my cats have email addresses. It's not for nothing. I got voted world's best cat daddy 23 times by the entire feline population of my apartment. So anyway, a couple weeks later, it's Friday morning, and I get a voicemail, and it's from one of these interns. And she's leaving a message for Stella, offering Stella the opportunity to have a free consult session with my client. Now, I found the whole thing hilarious, and my assistant, who saw the voicemail before I did, forwarded it to me and wrote in the email that she, because normally what she'll do is she catches the voicemail, she'll forward them to me, and she'll summarize in the email what they're about. She just forwarded the MP3 to me and typed, "For the love of God, just listen." And I listened, and I busted out laughing. And so I wrote to the intern, I said, "Do you realize you just offered a free strategy session to my cat?" And the intern replied and said, "When I saw that, I was pretty sure that was your cat, but I wanted to leave a voicemail just to be on the safe side." So you guys can laugh at this all you want. But this particular client of mine, she's an internationally acclaimed author and success coach, is beating most people around the block because she and her team do something that 85% of all business creators are just simply not willing to do. And those two things is they pick up the phone and make calls, and they speak with prospects and make offers. So if you think that whole thing was silly, have a good laugh and then stifle it and start dialing.
Super awesome. So have a good attitude about it. Don't take yourself too seriously. And, as you were explaining those two stories, what really struck me is that, it's good to be obsessed. It's good to have an obsession, especially about your business, making money, having a cause, adding change to the world and all that stuff. But a lot of people's obsession is only internal, right? Like,
right.
I might make these mistakes, might have these typos. What about this? What about that? And if we move the obsession externally, then we'll take more action and we'll like think things through better. Like when you had that story about the speaking gig there, some people might have just showed up to the speaking gig and tried to push their links, tried to push their book, and then been banned and never been invited back. But instead, right. you followed up, you worked with the event organizer to figure out if a deal can be made. And this also relates to that idea of it's tempting. It's probably our caveman nature to have this black and white thinking when, back in caveman days, we'd only live 20, 30 years old. So we didn't have time to think things through, right? We didn't have 6 months to figure out, well, I'm a caveman. How do I get my caveman book out to the masses? You're like, right. I'm out in the jungle. If I see a tiger, I'm gonna stab the tiger. If not, then I won't stab whatever I'm seeing. And if I come around a corner and something jumps out at me and I stab a person, well, it's caveman times. Just kind of move on. But times have changed here. So if we can be obsessed to the point where we even might, research someone's cat and offer their cat coaching or kind of add the little bit of that personal touch, I think that we'll all have a lot more. I guess you might call it luck, but there's right. all those sayings of like, well, it's luck, but it's like the harder I work, the luckier I get, or it's like I keep plugging away, and eventually, if the luck is 1%, I plug away 100 times. Eventually, these things will pay off. So this is really great as far as changing our thinking and inspiring and motivating us. And so I'm sure that a lot of people listening are like, geez, who the heck is this Adam Hommey guy, right? I heard him on Robert Plank's podcast. Now I have something to tell the grandkids. I'm fascinated. I want to know about what he has going on. So what sort of websites and offers do you have for us? I mean, how do we get your book? How do we hire you for everything? How do we just reach out to you?
Well, first of all, let me make one final point about the intern who offered my cat a strategy session. There are some business creators and some entrepreneurs out there who would be mortified if they found out that somebody working for them had left a message for a cat. They would say, this is absolutely unacceptable. This is a poor reflection on our company. It makes us look like a joke, and we need to screen our prospects better. Okay, gag me with a spoon. The reality is the prospects you want to have become your purchasers, your clients, and your customers for life are going to look at that and say, Look at those people. They left a message for my cat. Isn't that so cool? It makes me realize that they're really fun, down-to-earth people. And I keep in the back of my mind that if I ever were to need that particular client's type of coaching, that she would be my first and probably my only call. I even recommended one of my other clients invest in her coaching program. He did so, and he's gotten life-changing results from it. So when people see you do stuff like that, as you said a moment ago, it's just a fun story to tell your grandkids someday. Show them your human side. Show them you can do these kind of quirky things. And people are going to see that you're just fun to work with, and it's going to help accelerate the know, like, and trust continuum. So as far as what we can do, I would encourage everybody to go grab a copy of the book. It's called Groundhog Day is an Event, Not a Business Strategy. And you can get it at www.thegroundhogbook.com. I made a nice URL for it with the landing page just so that you wouldn't have to, remember an Amazon search. Just go to www.thegroundhogbook.com. As far as anything else we have for your audience, I'd encourage you to go to my business website, which is www.businesscreatorsinstitute.com. That's businesscreatorsinstitute.com. Go to the menu, find a link called Resource Kit. And my entire collection of downloadables is contained within the entry-level membership of the Business Creators Institute, which you can get absolutely free. It's my gift to you. This is only going to be available for a very limited time because we're actually considering phasing this out to the general public. But for listeners of Robert Plank's podcast, you are entitled to have that for free. So remember, just businesscreatorsinstitute.com and look for the link called Resource Kit.
Super cool. So once again, thegroundhogbook.com and businesscreatorsinstitute.com. And like just the big lesson that I've been getting from our conversation here today, Mr. Adam, is that, even Elon Musk sells flamethrowers. And if you make an effort to be boring and to just fit in and conform, then no one's going to notice you, right? There's the reticular activation system. If you see a bright red car driving around, like, it'll stand out from everything else. So why limit yourself? Why try to push down your weirdness, your personality? Why not make it part of your marketing? A lot of these things that you're worried about that could be mistakes aren't really mistakes. And even if they are, there are ways to make into a fun marketing strategy or turn it into a positive, or at the very least, you'll get noticed. So, a lot of things that people need to be aware of and thinking about. And, even if up until this point, things haven't lived up to your dreams and expectations, or if you feel bad about being stuck in this loophole, it's okay. You don't need to merge the past and the present and the future, right? Today, now that you're awake and now that you know that a lot of these things that you thought were wrong are okay, well, now you can move forward with a heck of a lot less fear. Now you can take more of those risks. You can make those phone calls. You can talk to those prospects, take the actions that you need to take. And this book is going to help you do that. So make sure you go to thegroundhogbook.com to claim that. And you check out that book, you read it, it's going to change your business and your life. And then you're going to say, well, you know what, this guy Adam, some of his tips and strategies and stories and things like that really opened up my way of thinking. So then you're going to want to go to businesscreatorsinstitute.com, click on that resource kit before it's spaced out, and that way you'll get all those extra resources to get you to where you need to go, because you don't know how much time you have left. And if you wait a year, 5 years, 10 years, all you're going to end up with is you're going to look back 10 years later and say, geez, I wish I didn't take 10 years to build the business of my dreams or to get to my goals. I wish I'd done it in a couple of months, not a couple of years. So go ahead, do it right now. Take action, thegroundhogbook.com and businesscreatorsinstitute.com. And thanks, Adam, for stopping by and being real with us and sharing lots of cool stuff. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the time today.
Want to listen to more fantastic Marketers of the Day? Subscribe to us at marketeroftheday.com/iTunes and browse past episodes